It's the Bradley J. Show, and we are live with Michael Coyne, who's the Dean of the Massachusetts School of Law, a regular guest for a long time, and the timing is perfect. We're here to kind of break down the charges against former President Trump and find out as much as we can. There was a lot to unpack yesterday for a regular dude who's not a lawyer. That would be me and probably you. So we have Michael Coyne here to break it down for us and let, give us some understanding about what happened and the context that it happened in yesterday in New York in a courthouse involving former President Trump. How you doing, Dean Coyne?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm looking forward to a spring and a summer and all. I'm pretty optimistic.
Aren't we all? We can't wait. It sounds like next week will be a beautiful week.
Okay, so do it. Let's do it this way. You watched along with everybody else, but you watched through professional and practiced eyes, looking for certain things. Tell us what happened yesterday and what you were looking for and what you heard and what you saw and what it means as far as you're concerned.
Well, as everyone knows, we all didn't see as much as we would have wanted to see with respect to the courtroom activities themselves. But subsequent to the courtroom activities, where the president was brought into the courthouse, he was fingerprinted, there was a DNA swab taken, and he was, in fact, under arrest. He was then arraigned in the courtroom, and an arraignment is a simple process where you are informed of the charges and you have the ability to plead guilty or not guilty. He entered a not guilty plea to the various charges. And the biggest thing that happened yesterday is that the indictment, in fact, was released so that we could see what the charges are and what facts support those charges. And that happens at arraignment, and it happened yesterday. So now both he and the rest of us understand what the basis for these 34 felony charges are and what facts they have to support it. But this wasn't what we call a speaking indictment. This was a pretty bare bones indictment listing the specific statutory crimes involved and giving a few facts that would support the violation of that statute under New York law. There also was a statement of facts released with it, which gave more details to the events in question, and they really deal with three matters, all part of what Trump and Michael Coyne, or Michael Coyne at least, has described, and the government has described as a catch and kill operation. In anticipation of him running for election, and maybe even before that in his personal life. What they would do is they would have individuals who had damning personal allegations against him, an affair with the president, a potential illegitimate child, a sexual relationship with a porn star, in order to keep that information from getting to the press and affecting people's impression of him and their willingness to vote for him. They would have those individuals, in return for money, execute non-disclosure agreements and keep that information from public view. And the point of it was to be able to keep that a good distance from President Trump, to make it believe that either the Inquirer or some other organization was paying for those services, and that it was all done at the end of the day to help President Trump in his image. And so the government says that much of those activities, whether it's Stormy Daniels or the doorman or the Playboy bunny, that these were improper deductions taken and entries made in business ledgers and as business expenses done to influence an election, and therefore that those constitute the misdemeanors of the improper entries done in a way to affect the election and to affect other matters, constitutes felonies under New York law, and that's why he's charged with these offenses. And so there's a lot of offenses here, but most of them are really all predicated around three events. And so that's part of one of the questions people have. Well, this sounds like overkill for a relatively minor matter at its core, But you really do have to look at whether the law was violated and the evidence that is there that supports it. And there does appear to be an attempt here to hide activities in a way that violated New York's criminal law. And therefore, that's why he's facing so many felonies, which is kind of odd if you think about it and put it in Boston perspective here. Whitey Bulger only faced 32 charges in his offenses here, many of which dealt with murder, all felony offenses, but the president has now exceeded those level of charges by 2. He's facing 34 felonies.
Okay. Before we go on, I'd like to clear something up. I would like to point something out. There are many that say this is strictly political vindication or vindictiveness. But I'd like to point out that everyone agrees that this will be good for Trump politically. This has already helped him raise at least $7 million, and even Trump's old people and supporters say, "Oh, this is going to be good for him. It's going to launch him in this election cycle." And on the left, they fear the same thing. Both sides agree this is good for Trump electorally. I don't see how you can say that this is political in nature when, if it was political in nature, it would be counterproductive. It seems to me that, well, I always view things like, if I did this, I would be screwed. And people say, well, why are they, why are they bringing these charges? Because if they're crimes, they're crimes. Like, the converse would be, what do? Not bring them? Because they're not that serious? I mean, then if you're not going to charge people with these things, don't have the rule. Folks, you overpark for 15 minutes, you get a ticket, you have to pay it. That's, you can make the say, it's just a small thing, let it go. But they don't let it go on you. I'm surprised that people, don't see that this will be good for Trump, and therefore it's probably not really politically motivated. I wouldn't be surprised if Biden had lobbied behind the scenes to say, can we not make these charges because I would prefer to face Trump. There are many in politics that say that President Trump is the best gift to the Democrats that keeps on giving. They want to face him. And so, again, calling this political doesn't make sense. It seems to me, if you're going to have these laws and you're going to have a person, here's another thing, you have a person who behaves the way he does. I think that's, if anything, if there's any revenge involved, it's because he's been so mean to so many people that they're going to want payback. It's not necessarily political revenge, maybe, but what do you expect when you act that way? There you go. You don't have to be so mean, so belligerent all the time. You're going to make some enemies. There you go.
I think it may well end up being politically advantageous for the president. And as someone who believes in the rule of law and thinks that the rule of law should be the most important part of the process, in order to be fair, let's be real and recognize, and as a dean of a law school, it worries me a little bit, but let's not be naive about it. Politics, power, and money affect these types of decisions about charging an individual, not charging an individual, allowing them to plea out. These things, like it or not, race as well, play a role in our system, unfortunately. So is there a part of that? Would a Republican DA have likely charged him? The answer is probably almost absolutely not. The fact that he's charged by a Democratic DA gives rise to part of this. But again, let's take a look and take a step back at the evidence. I think part of what you're saying is true with respect to he is never apologetic for his actions. He flaunts his actions. The speech last night, he talked about moving the top secret documents because he could. He is someone that pushes the boundaries all the time. And so there is a natural tendency to want to curb that activity, especially when there is evidence to support violations of the criminal law. And people should who want to claim it's purely a political proposition take a step back. Michael Coyne went to prison for this very same activities. The National Enquirer pled guilty to criminal charges for the very same activities. And Michael Coyne was charged by President Trump's Department of Justice for this type of behavior. So if it was politically or purely political, how does that happen under Trump's administration, of Republican administration, and now happen here as well? The fact is, politics is a part of this equation, just like Hunter Biden's laptop and lock her up and all of the rest of the rants we hear now, and because of the discourse we're in these days. But at the end of the day, take a step back and say, is there evidence that supports criminal charges, regardless of whether you think those criminal charges are as significant as they could be? And I think if there's any political part of it that people are worried about, then let's be worried about the real political part here, that shoe has yet to drop. What about the election interference in Georgia that he very well may face an indictment soon for, as well as the events of January 6th and the attempt to overturn the government and the election results? Those are much more serious matters, and I think most people would find that if the evidence supports it, they would prefer to see those matters move forward before this, what I think some people look at and see it as a paper crime. It's a paper crime, but people go to jail all the time for paper crimes.
Right, it's a white-collar crime, and I'm surprised that blue-collar folks aren't irritated by rich dudes and women getting away with white-collar crime. So Boston Bob says, to this day, it's against the law to spit on the sidewalk in Salem. So first of all, I think it should be. I think that's gross. I'm glad there's a rule against that. And what he's saying, I guess Boston Bob is saying that, well, this is not that big a deal. And I would say that when you look at it compared to the other things that the former president's likely to be charged with, it is the lesser of them. It seems small compared to those massive things. But again, what are you going to do? Just let it go? Not me. I would have been on the hook for it. If white-collar people are committing crimes and cheating, then I want them busted for it. Now
I don't know. It's not the most serious crime in the world, but recognize what they were trying to do if the government is right here. They were using fraudulent means and lying to numerous people in order to subvert proper election results. The election results for the highest office in our land. That's what, in essence, the New York district attorney is charging him with. That's a pretty serious offense, even if the underlying matter is a sexual indiscretion and signing an NDA and all the rest of it. What the goal here is quite a serious and disruptive to our democracy. If he's able to get away with it scot-free, when we now know that there is evidence to support it. That's what the rule of law says, is we all have to be treated equally, and he gets his right to a jury trial and he can defend it on that basis. And if the jury finds him not guilty, then that's where the chips fall.
Very good. So it was floated because people kind of knew, they guessed correctly what these charges were going to be, that a defense to the charges would be that, hey, no, this was not about keeping things quiet for election reasons. This was so my wife wouldn't find out.
Yeah.
But there's evidence that they said, you know what? Let's just wait until after the election before we pay her off, because if we lose, we won't have to pay her off. And so that evidence shoots down the notion that I just didn't want my wife to find out.
Yeah, there is, and Ricky Kleiman yesterday floated an interesting theory along those lines as well, is that perhaps his defense is going to be, I didn't just do this for the election. I did it all my life. I covered up bad things I did because that's what we do. Either I want to keep it from my wife or my girlfriend or my children or whatever. that I didn't just start doing this stuff in 2016. I did it all my life. It's an interesting defense because what it tries to undercut is the criminal intent to subvert the election. I don't know whether he'd go that route, because then you're going to have the media and other DAs digging even further to see what the multitude of horribles that he's covered up over the years.
That seems like a fun.
Too enticing for people.
It would seem strange to say, I've had criminal intent all my life. So, by saying I've had criminal intent all my life, does not diminish the criminal intent here at all. So
it just says he may have had that criminal intent for other purposes other than to subvert the election. So, listen, I have no idea where he'll go at the end of the day with his defense, because it seemed to me in watching his two lawyers yesterday, even they weren't on the same page in the little press conference at the end of it. And the fact is, most criminal defendants should keep their mouths shut. Their lawyers should say as little as possible, because it gives you options as the evidence is discovered and the information unfolds, to have various options as to how you want to try the case and defend it. That's not going to be the case with this defendant. He's going to make statements that then are going to be used against him later on down the road. And we've just seen it time and time again, where we even saw it again last night, where he makes statements that most lawyers would tell their clients, just shut your mouth and wait till we get to trial. And at some point, you'll be able to tell the story you want to tell. But don't, in the meantime, the press and the law enforcement are not your friends in this regard.
So the judge admonished the president, admonished everybody about inflammatory rhetoric. And, of course, the president did not pay attention to that and gave an inflammatory speech that very, very evening. How far would you guess has he already violated that instruction by the judge enough to be in trouble for that? And if not, how far do you have to go? And also, while you're in a related topic, Don Jr. allegedly posts a picture of the
judge's daughter.
DA's the judge's daughter?
Yeah, the judge's daughter.
And there was the baseball bat. In both those cases, any reasonable person, a core of reasonable persons would deduce that those are threats. And further, a person would have a reasonable expectation that those posts could be construed as calls to violence.
Right.
It would be the natural thing to assume that. What other reason could it be? What the holding of a baseball bat seems a clear physical threat. Posting of the daughter there seems no other interpretation, but it's a threat. You're not just going to, hey, I thought I'd randomly post the judge's daughter photo. It's clearly intended as a threat. Why isn't it today the both of them charged with whatever you charge people with for that? Well,
your suggestion is that these are incitements of violence, and that's in and of itself another criminal offense potentially. And I don't disagree that if he continues to do such things, that there will be at some point a gag order. But I think the court is treading very cautiously here. I think it's probably going to be a 3-strikes you're out. He'll be warned again, and then he'll do it again. And then at some point the court will say, okay, the warnings and the cautionary instructions, none of them were enough. I'm now going to say you cannot say anything with respect to the case or the parties or the court personnel, or it will be contempt of court. And I think the reason the court hasn't done that yet, and is not likely to do it simply on the basis of the speech last night or on Don Jr.'s reference to the judge's daughter, which, by the way, Don Jr. wouldn't be covered by the order. He's not a party to this case. He may find other law enforcement come knocking to talk to him, but he's not part of this case. But I think the court's concern, and I think the court's overall concern would We've got someone running for the presidency of the United States. He has a constitutional right to speak out on the issues of the day, and to defend himself. And like it or not, this has now become an issue of the day in the next presidential election. And so there would be some real concern that you're infringing on his constitutional rights to not allow him to make some declaration, as he did last night, without intruding on that First Amendment. I think if it goes further down the line, I think he's probably going to get, in essence, a three-strike approach. That might have been one. He's got two more. When he pushes the boundary a little too far, at some point you very well may see a gag order against any further comments of that sort. And if there were clear incitements to violence, that would be, district attorney would think that is would be a successful prosecution. You may see additional criminal charges in that regard. I think the picture of the baseball bat and the DA, I think it was grossly improper. Whether it's a threat, I think that's a close call. I don't think you're going to get beyond a reasonable.
What could it be other than a threat? That would be my.
It's not a threat directly from him. The question becomes, is an incitement to violence by his followers, who we know that there is a fair amount of his followers that are relatively easily incited to violence. There have been incidents of firearms at his rallies. We saw the events of January 6th that followed the rally where the president spoke and said, we're all going to march down to Congress. There is a legitimate question whether that's inciting others to violence through such actions. And that it is a concern, because we live in dangerous, violent times where boundaries don't appear to exist anymore. Just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday as she tried to approach the rally, and it looked pretty chaotic to be able to try and get to where they were going. And there were certainly questions about whether that would become, that whole situation in New York yesterday outside the courthouse would become a violent and dangerous situation.
Those folks that talk about things being political and politicized, it's pretty clear that Marjorie Taylor Greene is basically running for vice president with her actions. And it was interesting to see that there were more anti-Trump demonstrators than pro-Trump. And Marjorie Taylor Greene got shouted down and had to leave. That was surprising.
Well, doesn't it show, again, it's another illustration of how deeply divided of a country we are. If that rally were held somewhere in one of the southern states, she would have been the hero, and the few anti-Trump people would have likely faced similar hostility that she faced in New York. But it is where we're at. New York is very different than Georgia, where she's from, and the sentiment was clear that we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. These people can be just as dangerous as people on the far right.
So Phil, Phil, who's a big fan of both you and the school, Massachusetts School of Law, what's the likely disposition of these charges? What about a plea deal?
He'll never plea. I mean, that's most people logically, they would likely take a plea on some of the misdemeanor charges, which wouldn't affect him very significantly, but would be a win for the DA and put it in the win tally. But he'll never do it. That's not the way he operates. He takes a scorched earth defense to every single case he's involved in. That will be the way this goes. There'll be a lot of motions and bluster back and forth over the course of the next year. And even if he's convicted at the end of the day, and this is why it really will try the case, he's not going to jail. There's no orange suit. He will face a fine, probably at worst, maybe some modest period of probation at best. I don't think realistically you can jail a former president of the United States on the basis of these charges, which almost always are going to be misdemeanor charges. They don't rise to the level of felonies unless another crime is committed in the process. That's the goal here, and that's what the government alleges has been done. So that's why I think some people look at it and say, well, so at the end of the day, this is much ado about nothing. Well, the consequences aren't significant other than the damage to personal reputation. Being convicted of a crime for most of us, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, is a very bad thing.
Right.
None of us want to have a criminal record. So there's that stigma that attaches to it, and the lawyers' fees that will be involved in having to defend this action, which he's raising money for as well.
Right.
That those consequences will be real. But when we talk about the possibility of imprisonment or along those lines, not here, not at all likely under the statutes in question, even though, just to put it all out there, if convicted of all 34 felonies, he faces over 100 years in jail. That's just not going to happen.
Okay.
That's the max at any point, and it's just not sufficient for these charges. Remember, at the end of the day, he is a first-time offender in our criminal justice system, at least convicted. But he is a first-time offender and is entitled to that as well. He's also entitled to some of the prestige of the office that he held at one point. That no one wants to see a former president of the United States behind bars. Or almost no one. No, almost.
I don't know if that's I don't know if that's true.
I know. As I say it, I know there's 30% of the country on either end of this spectrum that either love him or absolutely hate him. But I think, who had the most cogent comment about all of this is Stormy Daniels, who said it's a really sad situation when the former president of the United States becomes a criminal defendant and faces incarceration in jail as a result of his acts. And that's I think that's an honest and accurate assessment of this situation. It's sad, regardless of what you may think of the former president. And I agree with Phil too. That's why I caught myself. I think there are some that absolutely would have the picture behind bars and the orange jumpsuit on their refrigerator for the rest of their life.
So if he's nailed on a felony charge, even one of those, is he still able to run for hold federal office?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't think the conviction of a felony prevents him from running for office. What's interesting, in many states, it may prevent him from voting for himself, but it will not. I don't believe it will bar him from being elected. I think as a practical matter, as you said, and this is what supports some of the political part of it, I think the Democrats would rather see President Trump as the nominee. He lost to public votes of the popular vote. And he is more damaged now than he was when he lost the last election. I'm not sure this charge damages him significantly more than his actions of January 6th and the Georgia involvement. So I think at the end of the day, he will face consequences no matter what. But I don't think that jail is going to be one of them for these charges. We'll see what happens with respect to the secret documents and the Georgia election interference.
You mentioned legal fees. I want to get a sense of how they're mounting up, because not only does he have the New York team, he's got the Georgia team, probably. He's got the Mar-a-Lago documents team, and he may have January 6th people. So for each of these, like say the New York team, how many people might be on it? 5, 10?
Oh, yeah, 10 to 15. You're not seeing the whole group. You saw 3 attorneys yesterday, some other hangers on.
And they're each getting $500 an hour, right?
No. Maybe double that, believe it or not.
Okay. So let's just say they work 8 hours a day, $1,000 an hour. Times 10, that's 1,000 times 1,000 is $1 million, right? No, how much?
Yeah, in a case like that, he might. I mean, he's facing 34 felonies. You have an army of lawyers and backroom people who are working on it. And when you say work 8 hours a day, a lot of lawyers work a lot longer than that, and they don't just work a 40-hour week. So you easily can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And even in a case where you're going to trial on that many charges and it's a little bit involved, you absolutely could be looking at seven-figure defenses in all of those cases.
Right. So $1,000 an hour times 10 people is 10,000. Times 8 hours a day is 80,000 a day in one of them. So say it's equal for all four. That would be 32,000 a day. Like that's, I know he did earn $7 million in like 72 hours, but geez, he's burning through the cash. And the thing I don't get, you got to give the guy has crazy stamina, a crazy amount of ability to deal with this kind of this controversy, this people trying to get him all the time from all angles. How does he do it? How does he get up in the morning?
That's actually a really fair question. If anyone's ever been involved in litigation personally, it is incredibly draining on you. The uncertainty, the having to deal with it and be in the forefront of your mind all the time. I do think yesterday, as he was awaiting arraignment in the still picture they showed from the courtroom, you did see a little bit of that strain start to show, because he's usually very positive and full of bluster. I do think at some point, he's not a young man. All of these problems tend to weigh on you and seem to be the focus of your attention. And I think at some point, it does become problematic, distractive, and potentially physically damaging. And so it'll be interesting to see if more of these actions come online, whether he will change his stripes in essence and really start to think about, I need an exit strategy out of all of this. I'm done fighting the world, because we know people don't stop. And when you have enemies, as he has, as Republicans have of others, sooner or later, they're likely going to come for you, and sooner or later, they're going to be able to get you. And I think that has to wear very, very heavily on him to recognize that he is this incredible target. And perhaps his audience, his fans are starting to shrink a little bit, because they're going to find the next shiny coin who they like better, who maybe it's DeSantis and maybe it's someone else who doesn't carry the same baggage that he does, but shares many of the same ideas. And so there's a bigger reward with less downside to some of these other candidates. And that will probably be as difficult for him to accept as the various criminal charges he may face before we're done here.
And certainly he is a target for many. But I would say that it's really not about his political policies. There are many with similar political policies who don't have that many enemies. It's because of the way he treats people. You treat that many people that badly for that long, they're going to want revenge. And that is not about politics. That's about just being a bleep. That's about being a bad man, about being mean to people. And there's payback if you're mean to people that much.
I don't disagree that I think a lot of the feelings people have towards him are personal, not necessarily position based. But there's a lot of problems with various parts of ideology that people really oppose and really feel strongly about some of the stances he takes. Some of the stances he takes may be for political purposes only, but they still affect huge amounts of people and affect them directly. And that's why I think the feelings are so strong with respect to him across the spectrum.
Okay, so there's another case. The Dominion voting machine case is pretty interesting, and we decided we were going to speak about that. Yep. Where does that case stand?
Well, that case stands getting ready for trial, and that's going to be an interesting one, because this is the defamation case that Dominion Voting Systems brought against Fox and some of their on-air personalities with respect to lying about the Dominion voting systems and whether they were rigged and used as part of the ability to steal the election from President Trump. And if you've seen the emails and some of the information released, there's an awful lot of support for the notion that the Fox personalities, their some of their on-air folks during the week, they knew that this whole idea about the election theft from President Trump was absolute foolishness, spoke about it behind the scenes. But then once the red light came on with respect to the shows, they continued to tell the public that the election was stolen from President Trump, that it was Biden's presidency is improper. And it was all because of at least in part, because of the Dominion voting systems and the corruption that existed there. Well, Dominion said, we know that's not true at all. And so they're suing for defamation, which is the publication of false information about someone or some company, as it is in this case. And so now they've satisfied the court's request with respect to discovery, with respect to the standard as to whether the case is jury worthy. And they're saying this case is going to go to the jury. Now, the interesting part of that is that because Dominion is considered a public figure, they're not just going to have to show that what Fox was saying was false. They're going to have to show it was done either recklessly or with malice aforethought, that in essence, they knew it was false, but nonetheless published it, that information, and it caused damage to Dominion. And they're claiming nearly $2 billion worth of damage. So it's an interesting case, both from the standpoint of the whole idea about the stolen election, and it's also interesting from the standpoint of public figure defamation, which I'm wondering what your take on it is, because you're a personality, you publish and talk about certain things. And my opinion is, based on the evidence I've seen so far, I think Dominion has even though the standard is incredibly high, you have to show malice aforethought by clear and convincing evidence. Normal civil case is preponderance of evidence, just tip the scales ever so slightly. When we talk about clear and convincing evidence, it's the highest civil standard of proof we use. It's not akin to beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's a lot closer. So they have to prove malice by clear and convincing evidence, the recklessness that they knew it was false by clear and convincing evidence, but published it nonetheless. And so this could change at least some of the perspective on a public figure defamation law as it presently exists, because most times public figures don't sue for defamation because that standard is so high. If Dominion is successful, I think it changes some of that assessment for people when they decide to sue the media for publishing falsehoods about them. So that's my question for you. What are your thoughts on it? Because as a member of the media, potentially this changes the dynamic. Does it make you a little more careful about what you say? And maybe being careful, certainly in this case, I know you'd support, but maybe we all should be more careful if we're going to put out information about people. And how is that a bad thing if we're pushing the line and likely perpetrating falsehoods and inciting people to incredibly bad choices?
As far as I go, I've always been extremely risk averse when it comes to that, and crazy careful, not naming people by name, and also not saying things that are not really pretty provable. What is it? The truth is a defense. I mean,
yeah, so that's right.
So in order for anyone to sue me, they would have to prove it ain't true, which is so. You know, I stay the same. I'm very happy that they would be holding these people's feet to the fire for what they seem to have done. I don't see why malice is a standard at all. You shouldn't, like, malice means we intended to harm you. I don't think that should be there. We knew it was false and it did harm you is enough for me. I don't know why malice is in there, and whatever you can do to get rid of it is fine with me. How does that get in there from case law from before?
Well, yes, the New York Times versus Sullivan, which is a very famous case with respect to defamation. And part of the reason behind it is we want a robust press. We want them to dig deeply and examine and report on the events of the day. And at times, some of the rush of that, they will get things wrong. Okay, it happens. And that's why we're cutting them slack, because we think it's more important under the First Amendment that they are able to provide a robust information to us so we can make our own decisions. So they're given much more slack than when they deal with private individuals who are not public figures. And that's why we've set the standard, or why the courts have set the standard higher, is to balance the First Amendment and that press right and the public's need to have this information with the occasional mistakes that will happen. Now, when they go too far, when they exceed the permissible bounds, they should be held accountable. But the law has set those bounds, at least right now, relatively high. Now, Dominion, at least from the evidence we've seen so far, has some strong support that there were the people in charge of the information. Some of the information at Fox knew it was false, but in order to continue to profit and keep the audience they have, they continue to perpetrate these lies. And Dominion says that cost us money at the end of the day. It cost our business significant amounts of money, and now we want to be compensated, just as Fox, when it did all of this information to sell their time to advertisers, made money doing it. Now they should compensate Dominion for their losses. So it is an interesting dynamic. You rarely see a public figure defamation case go to trial. The last one, to my recollection, is Sarah Palin, who sued for defamation. She actually sued the New York Times for defamation, lost. But that's how difficult it is to generally recover as a public figure in a defamation case.
What did Sarah Palin, what were the terms of that?
I don't remember the exact details. My recollection is they had her involved in an event that she was not involved in, and she sued on that basis, being able to show that she didn't do it. It might have been, if you remember, there was a target direction at one of the other candidates. It might have been from Arizona, but that somehow they was alleging she was involved in this photo, the distribution of the information. And at some point they realized she wasn't, but they had already published the article. And so she sued on the basis of being defamed. But the question becomes, can you show that it was done with malice aforethought, that they knew it was false and nonetheless published it at the time? And again, that's a really difficult standard.
It says,
yeah,
jury rejects claim the newspaper damaged reputation by erroneously linking campaign rhetoric to mass shooting. Oh, okay. Yeah, and another thing about what people can say in the news is, as long as how much are you protected by couching it as an opinion? It is my opinion. Someone might say that Sarah Palin is stupid. You know, she could prove that she. I don't. Can you prove you're not stupid?
I thought truth was a defense, first of all. No, you're absolutely right. That's another part of this law. This series of protections is your opinion. If it's opinion and not published as fact, we're all entitled to our opinion, even if it's wrong. And so if your opinion is that the president is guilty, former president is guilty, that's okay, even though there's been no trial. But if you say he is guilty of these charges, then potentially he would have a claim that you're publishing that as fact, and it's certainly not fact yet.
Okay. So what if you had person A? What if you said, in my opinion, person A hit person B in the thumb with a hammer, and they didn't? Are you protected if you just say, in my opinion, even though there's no proof, none at all? You should say, I think that probably happened. In my opinion, that happened. Is that a protection?
I think you're probably still protected. I think that may be. I think that may be what we call a summary judgment case. You're not even going to get to jury if it in fact is clearly shown as opinion. Cartoons, satire, that's all falls within the same part of it, where it's not provided as fact. It's and by the way, I think we'll see some of that in that Dominion case, is that the Fox News hosts from 8 to 10 are not news people. They are entertainment folks. And so they're giving their opinion. They're not necessarily just talking about facts. The problem is the emails capture their opinion or facts as saying this is all horse hockey. It's all incorrect, but we want our viewers to keep viewing us. It's a horrible situation because you're playing on your own audience and you're also potentially laying seeds to attack the democracy. The Binion case is a very interesting case on a number of different perspectives, I think.
So isn't there some evidence that the Fox hosts, well, knew the truth, but said, the truth is this, but we need to keep our audience. Didn't they say that? I mean,
yes. The evidence is that strong.
That's the sad part is the truth is not even important at all. It's like, the truth it seems like for a brief period of time during the 50s and 60s, the Walter Cronkite truth mattered. I know prior to that, everything was political. Each side had their own newspaper, and we're back to that again, only very temporarily. And at a time I remember, the truth seemed to matter, and that's how I grew up. And so it's pretty devastating to me that we've gone back to it not mattering a whit, none, zero.
I don't disagree. I mean, I'm old enough too to remember Walter Cronkite and really sit there attentively, knowing that we were getting, I assume, the straight scoop. Although some would argue, by the way, that did we really get that in the early 60s with the Vietnam War and the like? But it certainly was straighter than the scoop we're getting today, almost regardless of what channel you turn to. We know we're getting someone's slant as opposed to the straight story.
And then you got to ask yourself, and we're way off the topic here, but who cares? Does anyone really want the truth? I don't know. I mean, a few people do, but I don't know. It's probably a lot fewer than I thought. People don't really want the truth. I believe I try to get the truth. I find John Bolton irritating, but he does seem to be a very straight shooter when it comes to things like Trump. And I don't like hearing it, but I feel it's my duty to listen to what he says. And it's uncomfortable, but I don't think other people want to be uncomfortable and hear stuff that, that they don't like. There are a lot of lefties that are listening to Fox and vice versa, and I think they should. That's why I got to say I kind of like Bill Maher. He says some uncomfortable things that it seems like he's being a straight shooter to me. I mean, yeah, he's opinionated, but I'm way off base here. I should probably even take that Bill Maher comment back.
I do think people, but I'm told I'm naive sometimes. I do think people want to know the truth, and I want the straight story. I don't need someone's spin or perspective on it. And I like to think that most people would value that. But I wonder where people think we can get that. Like,
where do you get it? I don't know. I guess the only way to get it is look at 6 news sources on both sides, and you have to do the math yourself. There is news called ground news.
Oh, I saw that.
Which takes a story and gets multiple sources on it and tells you how each source skews, and you kind of got to do the math in your head, which may be the only thing we got to do. Hey, we've gone almost 50 minutes now. I should let you go. Anything else? Anything else? It's so great to talk to you. You look so good and healthy. And,
you look great too. It will be an interesting next 6 months because I think there are more steps here that will be taken by the various authorities. We'll also then start to have this come out in some of the electoral process. It'll be an interesting 6 months as to where we go from here. And unfortunate, I think, at the same time.
Everyone was so afraid about this unprecedented thing to charge a former president, like the sky would fall. And it seemed like the various prosecutors around in the various cases were shy to do it. Maybe they're less shy now that this has happened and the sky didn't fall and there wasn't a bunch of violence.
I think that's right, but I do think they were legitimately and had the right to legitimately be concerned about violence in New York yesterday after January 6th. So, but it does say to others that if you plan properly, uh, these matters can move forward without the horrible problems we saw January 6th.
So, Michael Coyne, Dean of the Massachusetts School of Law, I hope you're wrapping up your semester, right?
We are. We have Animal Rights Day this Saturday up here. So we have a lot of events with the animals and dog training and all. It's actually one of the best days of the year up here. And then we finish the semester just a few weeks after that. So it's a busy time.
Well, I'm glad to see things are rolling along very well up there. And thank you again, Dean Michael Coyne, Massachusetts School of Law.
Thank you.
We'll be on.